Number 4 is the NFC East. Whoever wins the NFC East is going to get the 4th seed and get that home game in the playoffs. And you can see the big development here today is Washington. Washington getting the win against San Francisco. Meanwhile, the Giants losing to Arizona today. So suddenly, it's Washington a game up on the Giants. And look at this, a 71% shot that Washington will make the playoffs. The Giants now under 20%. By the way, Eagles fans, sorry, you got that huge upset win over the Saints. A lot of good that did. You took it from 6% to 11% chance. It's Washington now. In the last week, they beat Pittsburgh. They beat San Francisco. They watched the Giants get beat by the Cardinals, and suddenly it's Washington with a chance to pull away and win the NFC East and get the home game that comes with it in the playoffs.
All right, there's Steve Kornacki taking a look at the breakdown from the NFC East. Let's talk about the teams in the NFC East and how they stack up as we get to crunch time in the 2020 season. The Washington football team now controls their destiny or their fate. We're always very careful about not saying you control your destiny because no one can control their destiny. They control their playoff outcome. If they win out, they win the division. If they stumble, it opens the door for the Giants because the Giants hold the tiebreaker. Alex Smith, though, is the key. Now, Ron Rivera, the coach of the Washington football team, said after the game that Smith was removed for the second half of the win over the 49ers as a precaution. We'll see what the injury report says. They'll go with Dwayne Haskins if they have to, but it really seemed like the team had fallen out of love with Haskins. Now they may have to embrace him, at least for 1 week, Charean.
It's crazy, Mike, the quarterbacks that every team in this division has gone through. I mean, even the Giants, who've had their starter most of the season, started Colt McCoy. But you just look around at Washington has now started 3 quarterbacks, and the Cowboys have started 4 quarterbacks, and the Eagles have started 2 quarterbacks, and the Giants have started 2 quarterbacks. So it's crazy, and I think it says a lot about why this division is where it is. And I'm curious what you think of this, though. Is the winner of this division really the loser because they now can't draft any higher than 19th? Do you think that's the case in this division?
I think that, and you can call me crazy if you want, I think that you should never look down your nose at the opportunity to play a playoff game because next year, if your team is better, the players will have playoff experience. And maybe you'll get lucky and win the game, right? When the Panthers made it at 7-8-1 when Ron Rivera was the head coach 6 years ago, they won. And then they went to Seattle. Now they beat Ryan Lindley, the Cardinals' backup to the backup quarterback, but still they won. And they went to Seattle and they gave the Seahawks everything they could handle. So I think that it's and what happened the next year? The Panthers were wire to wire the best team in the NFC, and they almost won the Super Bowl. So I think if you get the opportunity to play playoff games, that's more valuable to your full locker room than getting a higher draft pick in the various rounds. I would always take the chance to roll the dice on the postseason because you never know what's going to happen. We assume that the 5 seed is going to go to Washington or New York or Philadelphia or, God forbid, Dallas. I'm kidding. And win easily. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the home team's going to win, even though, as we'll talk later in the program, there may not be much of a home field advantage this year.
Well, the crazy thing to me, Mike, is when I look at each of these teams, Washington is the one team I think can really benefit from exactly what you're talking about, is getting to the postseason and playing a playoff game because that defense is really good. I mean, we've seen that. They, to me, need fewer additions for next season, going into next season. I just think, if Alex Smith is going to be your quarterback and you've determined that, and you'll possibly get to see Haskins maybe this week to see if you still have confidence that he can do the job. And I know that Kyle Allen is beloved by Ron Rivera. We all know that. That's why he brought him with him from Carolina. But they, to me, look like the one team that could really benefit from that, from Ron Rivera building that program. The other 3 teams, to me, seem to have a ton of holes and could really use the higher draft pick. And I get what you're saying, though. You always want to win. You always want to go to the playoffs, and it is beneficial to go to the playoffs. But if I'm those other 3 teams, I'm probably in the end, if I don't make the postseason, I'm grateful for that high draft pick because I have a lot of holes to fill.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. And the thing is, these 4 teams are going to be competing next year in the same division. So whoever fills the most holes may be in the best position to take over the NFC East. The Giants yesterday, when they lost at home to the Arizona Cardinals, and if you listened earlier to the Hassan Reddick interview, he made it clear that the Cardinals understood the stakes. They had energy all week long in practice. They knew what they had to do to get themselves back into the playoff chase. The Giants, on the other hand, seemed flat, and it seemed like Daniel Jones shouldn't have played. And look, Charean, I'm not a physical therapist, I'm not a doctor, but I have had a hamstring injury, and I know that 2 weeks is not enough time to get it to the point where you can go out and push off of it. And the other loose understanding that I have of the hamstring injury, the higher the pull, the harder it is to get it healed. And Daniel Jones was grabbing pretty high on the hamstring when he injured it against the Bengals, specifically when he aggravated it after they put him back in the game. I don't think he had any business being out on the field. And they're going to pay for it now because it very well may be Colt McCoy going against his former team, the Cleveland Browns, on Sunday night. But in their zeal to try to stay in it and go with their best guy, they made the miscalculation that 100% Colt McCoy is better than less than 100% Daniel Jones, when you're running the risk that he's going to come out of it even farther less than 100% than he was.
Well, Mike, I think you saw it on his first throw. He had a wide open receiver, and I can't remember who the receiver was. Might have been Slayton, but wide open receiver, and he throws it behind him, has a reach back, and ended up completing the pass because it was a great catch. But you saw that he just didn't have that ability to push off on that hamstring on the very first play. And what makes Daniel Jones is his ability to run. He's second on the team in rushing, and he's second on the team in rushing for a reason, because he's really good when he gets outside the pocket. That, to me, is a strength of his, and he wasn't able to do that. And if he wasn't able to do that, I don't know why you played him. You give him another week to heal. You let Colt McCoy, who won a huge game for you the week before, continue that momentum. Let him play. Rely on that defense. And try to win the game. And I think they would have had a better chance if they had played and started Colt McCoy instead of Daniel Jones and let Daniel Jones heal. And I think long term, they, as you said, they may have to play Colt McCoy now this week because of what they did to Daniel Jones last week.
Last year, the Philadelphia Eagles were 5-7 before they finally figured things out. They got the big win over the Cowboys in Week 16, which gave them control of the division. All they had to do was beat the Giants Week 17, which they did, although that game was closer than many thought it was going to be. This year, the Eagles have commenced the process during the final 4 games of the season to start rattling off wins. The problem, though, Charean, is, unlike last year when they were only chasing one team, when you have 2 teams in front of you, you have to have both teams stumble to give you the opening, which makes it much harder for them to duplicate what they did last year. They can win the next 3 games, but it doesn't matter if the Giants or Washington take care of their own business. Now, they get an opportunity to pick off Washington, so they have some control there. And maybe Week 17, Sunday Night Football, NBC, will be Washington at Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts versus Alex Smith, Ron Rivera versus Doug Peterson, a playoff play-in game. Maybe that's what we'll see. That's what it could come down to, but they need the Giants to continue to slump, and maybe the Giants will as well. The Giants don't have an easy road. So Philadelphia isn't done yet, but it's not going to be easy for them because they do have 2 teams, not one, to contend with.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mike. And I think it might come down to that Week 17 game, but it's such a key game this week for the Eagles. And I'm looking forward to seeing Jalen Hurts against Kyler Murray and seeing what he can do. And, of course, the Cardinals took care of the Giants. Well, the Cardinals take care of the Eagles. That's the key thing. If the Eagles can win that game, I certainly expect them to beat the Cowboys the next week. And then maybe it does come down to that last week, considering that Washington has Seattle this week. That's another big game. And, you know, a couple weeks ago, we were looking at it thinking these NFC East teams were playing some really good teams, and it looked like they were all going to lose. And they've beaten some really good teams. These at least the top 3 NFC East teams have beaten some good teams over the last couple weeks and really started to play much better. And when I look at these three teams, when you look at where they're ranked in offense and defense, they're a lot alike. They rely on defense. They don't have a great quarterback. They kind of sort of score enough points. I mean, you look at Washington scored 2 defensive touchdowns. They didn't even score an offensive touchdown. But they're so much alike, these three teams, that it's going to come down to which one can play the best defense the rest of the way, because we don't know what's going to happen at the quarterback position for any of these three teams. They all have questions at the quarterback position.
And then there are your Dallas Cowboys, Charean. They're not dead yet, but unlike the Eagles, they have 3 teams that they have to jump. And Jerry Jones, Friday on 105.3 The Fan, his word salad about why it's actually a good thing they were flexed out of Sunday Night Football. They're still the biggest draw in the NFL. No, they're not. No, they're not. You know, we started at one point today on PFT Live to talk about their win over the Bengals, and Sims and I spontaneously decided that no one cares. No one cares. At this point, no one cares about the Dallas Cowboys. They're not dead yet, but it's pretty damn close because, as we said, they're in last place. They've got to jump 3 teams over the next 3 weeks. It's highly unlikely. Just because they beat the Bengals doesn't mean that they've solved their problems. This is something that's going to take some renovation in the offseason. Stephen Jones said today that Mike McCarthy's definitely coming back. He's surprised it's even a question. Well, if you're surprised it's a question, you're not paying attention. And, of course, they're not going to fire him. As you have said, they don't want to buy out his contract. It would be roughly $24 million over the next 4 years if they would fire him. And they don't want to admit they were wrong. So they're going to try to make chicken salad this offseason, hope to get Dak Prescott back, hope to get him signed, and hope that they can have a better outcome next year. Jerry Jones said he'd like to get a mulligan on 2020. I think in his mind, 2021 is his mulligan on 2020.
Yeah, Mike, and the funny thing is all my friends and neighbors who are Cowboys fans texted it, or I've seen some of them today, and they're mad the Cowboys won. Like, they want that draft pick. They were 5th in the draft order going into that game, and, of course, that hurts their draft order. But they want some defensive players. They want some defensive help on that side of the football to match these other teams. Dak Prescott was leading the league in passing, and they still had a losing record when they had him. They have to get better on defense. The way to do that is have that high draft pick and have your choice of who you pick up defensively.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.